And Micheal, I really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing your work and your ideas and your thoughts and your experience with my class and other people, your friends, and a few other folks hopefully will be coming in. And this has been a really great opportunity, particularly for my students who, they don't get to see too many visiting artists. And so this brings up their opportunity to meet you. So let me introduce Robert Micheal Smith. I met Robert at an international sculpture conference not that long ago. I think we're in Pittsburgh. I think that's the first time I actually ran into, talked to you and shook your hand and had a glass of coffee or a cup of coffee or beer or something. And ever since I've, really have followed your work, and I'm really really amazed with your work. Now, Robert is, well, he retired, and he was teaching at the New York Institute of Technology, and so lived in New York City, but now he's retired and he's moved back to his home to California because he earned his BA. And this is interesting, folks, because a lot of my students are graphic design. He studied graphic design for his undergraduate degree, as did I. It's interesting how that works out. And then went on to earn his master's, and you'll love this, folks. Went to the University of Hawaii in Manoa in Honolulu. So how cool is that to be spending your graduate studies in Hawaii or Honolulu? Of course, Robert has exhibited his work in numerous exhibitions. His exhibition, they're very incredibly impressive. Not only is he exhibited in the United States and Europe, Jordan has one of your pieces, but Asia, it's been around. And I urge you to look at his resume when you can, because it's very extensive. Not only does he show, but he also coordinates a lot of opportunities. One thing that I really want to go to is the Digital Stone project that he has been coordinating for many years in Italy. Unfortunately, my fingers they're in pies all over the place, but I'm gonna have to make a effort to make that happen. So again, Robert, thank you for attending. I'm gonna let this off to you.
Thank you, Kurt. And yeah, it's a pleasure to lecture with your group. Now, I actually lectured in person at Lamar University, but it was like in 1986. So it's been a long time since I had interactions with Lamar, but there is some history there. Anyways, it's nice to meet with this group this morning, and I have a lot of stuff to show, and I have to choose what I have enough stuff to keep going for hours, so I have to choose what not to show, and some things I'm going to have to move quickly through. Some videos I just can't show all of it. Just to give you some heads up, and we'll start with the PowerPoint. Now, Islands in the Stream, Singularity Art, Sustainable Life for Post-Humanity. This is usual academic hyperbole to sell an idea. But Islands in the Stream is based on a Hemingway novel. But I found my own islands in the stream, which I'll be showing as we go along. Singularity art is a term which is used a lot in China.
So Robert, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're not seeing your screen.
Oh, okay. Thanks for giving me a heads up on that. I got to get back to my Zoom window. Why is it not opening? my Zoom window is not.
Let's see, we got unmuted here.
So I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are. I got you unmuted, or you are, yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure why I even lost the entire Zoom window. I only see you at this point.
Is it okay, if you bring your mouse to the bottom of the Zoom window, do you see in the middle called share screen?
I can't even open that whole window. The only thing I see is a tiny window with you. Oh, here. Oh, I got it now.
Yep.
Okay, I have share screen on. So, are you seeing my screen?
Not quite yet. You'll have to, so when you share your screen, you have to have your application open up in the background. There, I think we got it. Oh, we're
Okay.
almost there.
It says I'm sharing screen, right?
You are. Hey, you got it. There we are.
Okay. So sorry for these old senior moments with technology, but it happens. So anyway, singularity art is a term that's used in China to refer to contemporary arts that's related to Ray Kurzweil's idea of the singularity. If you haven't read his book, The Singularity is Near, or Age of the Spiritual Machines, the singularity is when humans and machine fuse to become one. We're already on our way there. If you are using your cell phone, you're already on the way to the singularity. The next step is when this becomes a chip in your head. And we just start thinking all of this stuff. But some of us are already making art like the singularity is here. But sustainable life is the other paradigm that's going on in the whole planet, that the world is dying. It's physically dying, and we're killing it. And we can use technology to help us save ourselves, or we can use technology to speed up the slow death. I'm one of those people who's making, it's all about choices. So I think that we can choose to save the world. And post-humanity is a term which is being thrown out now, that people, as they've been for thousands of years, or maybe even several hundred thousands or millions of years, once we fuse with the machine, that's a species of the past. And we are at that last generation of original humans. Now, my hope is that we can bring along some of the best of humanity, while we hopefully can leave behind a lot of the worst. And there's no shortage of worst of humanity. So post-humanity could be thought of as a dystopian future, and we're all just terminators and battling out with machines. Or it can be a choice that we can be transcendent, almost in a Nietzschean kind of way, that we become better humans. On the other hand, yes, we could just as easily become worse humans. It's all in our choices. So having sort of introduced you to the sci-fi portion of my art, I'm going to actually get into the work itself. Now, I have a long history of making art that predates this by decades. So I'm starting at about 25 years ago, which I think is where my work made a huge shift. And I started using 3D computers in about 1990. So I've been at this now for 30 years. Makes me one of the pioneers. There's a couple of people who predate me that are very good friends, which you'll see in my presentation. But in the beginning, I used this as a visualization tool. And some of these were objects and some of them became immersive environments. And these are some of the very early experimentations about 30 years ago with this technology. And of course, there was always this Freudian Jungian ideas, sexuality. This is based after Freud's vagina dentata idea, but that becomes a creature which is both nurturing itself and raping itself at the same time. So there's a lot of these dichotomies at work. But I was also in love with the wireframes themselves. So what I was seeing was not necessarily what I was exhibiting. And what I was seeing was much more exciting to me. And I wanted to get to that base. So I started making prints of the wireframes of the sculptures. There were also a lot of animations that were made at this time. Maybe I can show you an early animation. It's only a minute long. Quantum's a long one. That's one I would love to show, but we don't really have time for that. Okay, well, sorry, that's not going to happen. Oh, no, it's a format that's not supported. And now we've jumped ahead. So sorry, there was a technical glitch on that one. So I'll just keep going with the. So the wireframes themselves eventually became sculptures. And I started using 3D printing. I guess it was probably about 25 years ago. So where a lot of people think that 3D printing is this new thing that's like 5 to 10 years old, that's not true. Actually, it was being used by the aerospace and car industries in the 80s. Some of us were able to get access to some of that technology through the companies. In my case, it was mostly through the companies that were manufacturing the machines, and they wanted to show what could be done. And a sculptor is more likely to come up with ridiculous solutions to industrial problems. Of course, no one expected me to start making things that look like living forms. They thought, oh, digital art is going to all be this boxes and triangles coming out. But no, I went for as much lifelike form as I possibly could. And these are some very early. When I was at New York Institute of Technology, I have been teaching. I taught for 40 years, and I did my last 20 years at New York Institute of Technology, and I got tenured in the whole thing. And what's nice about being tenured is you can ask for expensive toys, and sometimes they'll actually give them to you. So I had a Z-Core plaster printer, gypsum printer. I guess it must have been around 1999 we got access to that. And then I always had machines. Also, universities pay for the materials, and the materials themselves can be expensive. and not to mention the labor force that it takes to keep these machines running, because they're not very reliable, unfortunately. So you'll see a lot of forms that either look like living plants. I spend a lot of time gardening, especially these days during COVID. But I grew up in the countryside. I also spent a lot of time scuba diving around the world. And so the forms, they look like life, but maybe they look a little bit more like Precambrian life. I really see these more as potential synthetic life, that either they could exist on some far distant planet, that there is an algorithm of life. And if you start playing with Fibonacci numbers and the Mandelbrot set, eventually you are playing with the algorithms of life and you will generate lifelike things. But of course, being a human, I'm also putting the psychology, again, we're back to a Freudian Jungian concept here, sort of a coital interruptus. I also started, because I had an extensive traditional background in sculpture, metal casting, and then eventually got into a lot of other materials, new plastics, space age materials, but also with a knowledge of traditional things like gold leafing things. So I even started to gold leaf and silver leaf the sculptures, which then even started to show the machine pattern. So on one hand, you have this piece of nature or seeming nature, but it has machine surfaces. So it's really pushing the post-human synthetic biology ideas. Now, I also started traveling the world a lot more, and I started working with craftsmen in other parts of the world where things are just cheaper. So I could have the best woodwork people in the south of China, or marble carvers in Vietnam, sandstone carvers in Cambodia. But I also was fortunate to be introduced about 20 years ago to the digital stone division at Johnson Atelier. And I was really one of their early clients. Eventually, Seward Johnson decided to close the stone division, and I became part of a group that formed a not-for-profit entity called the Digital Stone Project. And we took over that business so that we could keep pushing this idea. This is one of my first sculptures that was actually carved by a 3-axis machine. So it wasn't just making 3D prints and then taking them to a craftsman and having them larged. It was actually having the machine do most of the manufacturing. There still is some final handwork. Machines are still too expensive to do that, but eventually the costs go down in everything. And one day, you know, I could be like Stephen Hawking and blinking at a screen, and I could be manufacturing giant sculptures all over the world and other planets eventually. But this is the same file, but used to carve a 6-foot version of, this is a public library in White Plains, New York. And this was carved by the Digital Atelier. John Lash runs that. But again, this was done like 20 years ago. So, and I'll tell you that I really love working that way, but the problem is that it's still very expensive. Now, this is a 3-foot cubed black granite that was carved by craftsmen in China. Same group in the south of China. This is a white granite. Now, I can tell you the difference between different stones, like soapstones and things like that, you sit them out in the rain and they'll disintegrate. A marble piece will last outdoors maybe hundreds of years. It'll eventually start showing erosion. But granite will show almost no erosion in like 10,000 years. This is an amazing material. So I always joke and say my real audience are the space aliens who are coming back, in 10,000 years to find the post-humans or what's left. This is a red granite carved in the same part of the world, south of China. Now, I also exhibited a lot in the south of China. And this was one of my favorite pieces. It was also one of my more successful pieces. In fact, this piece is now in the permanent collection of the China National Museum, one of the few Westerners. But this is in Chongqing, which is a city of 33 million people. It's about 10 or 11 New York cities. And this is at where the Yangtze and the Jiaoliang rivers come together in the center of the city, two of the largest rivers in the world. So it's a nice venue to keep a piece placed. But I think now it's time to show a video that will tell you a little bit more about the digital stone exhibition and some of the techniques that we've used. I've been talking about 3D printing. So here you can actually see it in operation.
You might want to turn on your volume.
Yeah, it's up at the highest.
Okay.
And he talks a little low. It gets better after this. Okay, so back to the PowerPoints. So that gives you more of a sense of how we were working back then, and to a large degree, it's still similar. Although as I go on, you'll see that some things have become more advanced, but we also find that just going back to traditional ways of working and traditional craftsmen is still a better solution in many cases. So this was the exhibition as this was from the catalog, and some of these shots are from location. This is a piece I did in Vietnam, simply because workers in Vietnam are cheaper than workers in China. Workers in the south of China are cheaper than workers in the north of China. And then eventually it's cheaper in Cambodia or Myanmar, or there's places in the world you can go. I mean, I was trying to figure out what people make in Kathmandu, just like, okay, I want to go see Kathmandu. I want to make some art while I'm there. What do the craftsmen do? I don't care. I work with any material now because I can design in a computer and transform it to any material, any process, new or old processes. Sculpture that was also produced in marble in Vietnam. Very high grade marble, as good as the marbles in Italy. And I know because I also work in Italy a lot. In fact, this is a marble quarry in the mountains of Carrara. And we run a summer workshop that is just a little down the mountain from here, not too far, because we're up on a high alpine valley. But on the other side, you can actually see the Mediterranean. You can go down the mountain, and then you're in Carrara, Pietrasanta, which are very famous locations for sculpture. Now, this is one of the most high-tech marble quarries in the world. You'll see later that I'm working with people who are far less high-tech. So I work with every level of technology. And this became my sculpture assistant. It's a 7-axis robot, whereas I started with 3-axis robots, which essentially can go up and down and X, Y, and Z. But a 7-axis robot is able to go around and get undercuts and things that a 3-axis robot never could. And this is the first sculpture that I produced with a 7-axis robot. And I was pushing the parameters, I have to say. The problem is that I actually had to go and finish doing a lot of the handwork, and there was a lot more handwork on this than I would, because it turns out that even though they could have carved it more, it would have quadrupled the amount of machine hours, and they were only saying, well, we're only doing 30 hours. We're not going to do a week on the machine for you. We got to get a bunch of other work done here. So fortunately, I am a trained sculptor, and I actually can work with my hands and do. This was the second year at the Digital Stone. And if you're interested in the Digital Stone project, we have a website at digitalstoneproject.com. And we had to cancel the last 2 summers because of COVID, but we're hoping that we're going to be back in operation again by next summer. And this is something that professionals can join, but also we accept excellent graduate students. Now, we do have a curatorial process, so we don't just let everybody through the door. But if you're very confident in your work, you have some digital skills, I highly recommend that you try to apply. In the third year, we had a really great venue for the exhibition afterwards. This is looking over Florence. So this is a new age technology stone carving that's over the city of Michelangelo Donatello. But I'm telling you that Michelangelo would have gotten it. He actually worked this way subtractively, but also, they used perspective drawing, which was a mathematical technique that all of our computers are based on. It's just that we can do it in a matter of seconds, what they would take weeks or months to do. But the bottom part of this, actually, I was left with a bunch of raw block stone, and I just went in with a chisel, and I did actually start attacking it traditionally, like Michelangelo, sort of playing like his slave series, where the parts of the bodies are emerging out of raw stone. Now, this was also one of the more recent pieces that I did. Now, this is a 3D print, and I'm going to show you more, but this was produced in a very different way. I always, since I started using the computer, it's like, it was really hard to learn how to design computers on a keyboard, which essentially I had to learn how to be, fortunately I learned typewriting when I was in high school. But then it's like you're drawing with a mouse, which I've always described as like, it's learning to draw with a rock. I'm actually really good in clay. I'm really good with tools. And that technology, of course, is now called haptics. And I always wanted a haptic device. From 30 years ago, I wanted the tools to do this piece, which I do have now. And I'll show you another video that will explain this quite well. Let's see which one. Oh, here we are, drone VR test. This is about 2 minutes long. And this is the future of making sculpture. I'm in a VR headset, and these systems now cost as low as $300. And the new ones, you don't even need a computer. They have their own computer chips right in the headsets. But here you'll see that I'm modeling a sculpture in space. Now, if I metal cast this, I actually can physically produce this piece. But a lot of times I'm producing pieces now that I don't even care whether I can manufacture them physically, because I'm creating virtual exhibition spaces, and I'm coming up with new sculptures that you can experience only in VR. And since this equipment now is only $300, it means that anybody in the world, well, practically most people anyway, could have access to experience these pieces. And eventually, again, when the singularity is here, we're all going to be in this space anyway, or in and out of this space in a very ubiquitous, easy matter of just simply making choices from 1 minute to the next. Now, what's nice is that I can actually change the scale of this thing so I can see it at full scale. I can even make it larger if I want, but I can also shrink it down to the size of my hands, and I can hold this sculpture in my hand, and then 2 seconds later, just open my arms up and make this as large as I want to make it. So having those kinds of freedom of scale and not worrying about gravity is something that I experienced very early when modeling in 3D programs, but now it just is far more natural. And you can start pushing sculpture out in ways that most people would never even have considered, simply because it doesn't make any technical sense to try to manufacture a piece that complex. And this was actually the art department at New York Institute of Technology on our campus in Long Island. So this sculpture was in fact modeled by haptically in a VR program. And I set the task for myself because the technology had just come out like in November. I bought it for myself at Christmas in December. In 2 months, I had to learn how to do all this stuff, make this piece virtually, send the file to Italy, and then in the summer, I was hand finishing the piece in a Carrara marble at about 2.5 feet in height. So here you can see, yes, I actually can function as a traditional sculptor, but I'm physically tightening up the details on a piece that you'll see that there's the rapid prototype. So I like to have a small model to refer to, and you can't just simply keep the virtual thing there with you. So having a physical model that I can refer to, but this was a piece that was modeled in space in virtual reality, and then cut by a 7-axis robot in a nice little mountain village in Italy, which is a nice way to spend a month. And then, of course, we always have an exhibition afterwards. You'll see that we come up sometimes with unexpected little tricks because we find things from the artifacts of the machines. So all of that tool mark along the bottom of the base was just a happy accident, and we just chose to keep it because it sort of lends that sense of authenticity. Like, this is some of the glitch from the process, from the machines. This is one of the more recent pieces I did. It's been about 3 years that I did this piece. Trump was in office, and I decided to do a sculpture about Trump's hair. It's, obviously it's a very abstract and arcane political statement. And this is a piece that I did. I sometimes get, because I'm involved, I'm usually one of the first people getting involved with these technologies. I was asked to come in as a consultant for a stone company in Long Island who wanted to buy one of these 7-axis machines. So I even helped them find the guy to run the machine. As a kind of a payback for my consulting, they cut this sculpture for me. I'm going to take another kickback on a video here to show you that since I was already dealing with the virtual reality, I've been modeling these lifelike things in computers now for almost 30 years. And I selected out the 15 best pieces, including the newest one, which was modeled in virtual reality. And I always saw these things not as sculptures this big or that big. I saw them as big as buildings. And in the virtual world, I could see them that way, but I couldn't show them that way. And The largest commission I've gotten is a piece that was over 12 feet in height. But I want everybody to experience these pieces as 30, 50-foot pieces. So this is an animation of a virtual, this is a virtual reality world. And you can, of course, this animation is making you stuck in a path. But when you're in this world in the VR headset, you can walk around and move in any direction you want. In fact, you can be Jesus Christ in this and walk on the water. You know, it's kind of one of those bizarre things that on one hand, you actually can get motion sickness.
He's probably inside your bed.
What's that?
And he's not right. He's not coming out until he's ready.
I didn't hear the comment. So in fact, here you're going to see that we are actually walking across the water here. Now I could change that. I could even allow you to go under the water if I wanted to, but because I was more interested in showing the sculptures. You are moving across them, but when you're moving across the land, people get motion sickness. I've had people literally almost faint because there's a very strange sense of reality in this virtual world. The soundtrack is also an original soundtrack by a friend of mine who's a professional musician. And it's nice to do these kind of collaborations. I often work with scientists and technologists as well as craftsmen around the world. It's I don't necessarily have the lone artist in the studio life. I obviously there's moments, but that's what I'm doing. But then I'm also always engaged with working with other people to make things happen. So to kind of go back to my own beginnings, I was a metal caster. And I was part of metal casting from the mid 70s in California, and then connected with the group around the United States, which has now gone international. I was part of some of the early iron casting conferences at University of Minnesota with Wayne Potratz, back in the mid 80s. In fact, the connection that I came to Lamar was kind of through that metal casting. Now, a lot of the people that I've been engaged with as sculptors, you'd be surprised how many metal casters gravitated first to digital technologies, even before the stone people. Stone was a later development for me because I didn't really want to do all that hard work. I mean, metal casting was hard work enough. Of course, then I found out, well, I still have to do the finishing work on these things. But one of the things that I was never able to produce on my own, I did metal casting, bronze casting, aluminum, and iron for several decades. I ran foundries at universities, but I could never get a stainless steel piece done. I saw stainless steel being poured at, I worked for a while at Talix Art Foundry back in the late 80s, but I could never afford it. But when you suddenly you get introduced to another culture, another place, you find that things that are expensive in one place are not expensive in other places. So just like carving in granite is very expensive almost anywhere in the world, but not China, because they have lots of granite and they have lots of cheap labor. Same is true with stainless steel. The cost of stainless steel is not the expense, it's all the processes and all the labor it takes because it's just a harder material. But when labor is not the issue, so I was able to get a number of stainless steel pieces produced, which I was very happy with. So, and that's really woken up. The reason I went into digital technologies in the first place is I wanted to create the foundry for the 21st century, ended up becoming a stone carver. And now I'm going back and now I'm able to burn out 3D prints and cast them directly. So even like that complex, crazy piece that I was making in VR that you saw, I can 3D print that and in the right material, I can just set up a sprue system and I can cast that thing. Okay, now, as if any of this hasn't been crazy enough, I decided that it just wasn't enough to create animations of and visuals of Precambrian humanized life forms. I had to actually go really do it. And it seemed to me that the real future is synthetic biology. Now, I had written a sci-fi story when I worked on a CD-ROM game back in the early 90s. And it was about a sculptor of the future who was making human meat sculptures. Now, I didn't think that I was going to become that guy. I did it as a joke. But in that same joke, I created a guy who was making the first virtual sculptures, who was making first sculptures on the internet, using robots to carve. I mean, I became every one of those satirical characters that I had developed in the sci-fi story. The last one I had not done was create a human meat sculpture. Until in about 2012, I was watching a TED.com lecture with Dr. Anthony Atala at Wake Forest Institute of Regenerative Medicine. And he created a 3D printer that could print human organs. Well, you know, there is part of my brain that says, oh, what a wonderful man. He's going to save humanity in the future, and we're all going to replace our parts. And this is moving in the right direction of Kurzweil's singularity. But there's also this crazy sculptor, sci-fi sculptor in my head going, oh, a human meat sculpture making machine. So I actually reached out to this guy. Now, the video I'm going to show is 20 minutes long, and we don't really have time for that. But I am going to go through some quick highlights so you can actually see the machine carving and just get a sense of that, of the conversation between Dr. Anthony Natali and I. You can go to my website after at rms-sculpture.com, and in the links area, there is a link to this video and you can watch the whole thing. And I explain a lot more, obviously, in the Okay, I'm going to start jumping now, just so you can see the actual printing process, which is a couple of different nozzles. So that is the sculpture in the orange container. It's actually living human cells in the shape of the sculpture that sits inside of the exoskeleton that I also designed. Okay, so this is the time when I usually predict that the peasants are going to come out with the pitchforks. Now, what happens when you make a living sculpture? You have the very real possibility, in fact, the likelihood that it's going to become a dead sculpture in a very short period of time. And what do you do with a dead sculpture? I've never had that problem before in my life. I don't know any other sculptors who have. But I decided to make a reliquary. If you know the history of Christianity in Europe, they always took the bones or body parts of saints and they created these installations in churches that the peasantry could come in and see, you know, these body parts of these famous saints. So I created an installation that on one hand, you can see there's a television monitor playing the video on the right hand, which is the conversation between Dr. Anthony Italian and I. And then on the wall is an installation with the dead sculpture. Now, that was 2012, so it's been a while since I did that. But I didn't stop. In fact, my sculptures got more complex because I started thinking in terms of, instead of building exoskeletons with simple living forms, what if I create complex endoskeletons and then grow like systems on a matrix? I've learned a lot about synthetic biology, obviously, in the last few years. and I still work very closely with a biologist. Again, these are sculptures that maybe people aren't used to seeing sculptures like this. They look more like they're from a cabinet of curiosities from the 19th century. Now, I did show you the video of the VR. Now, this is how it's often exhibited. So on a table, I've got the 3D prints. Then there's a laptop with a VR hookup, and then somebody is experiencing these same sculptures at about 30 to 40 feet. This is in a Zaha Hadid building in Chelsea, near the skyline in Manhattan, which was a very hip. This was sort of what they call, was it drop exhibitions, or you just like, you organize these quick things and they get thrown in, people show up and there's a big party. So I'm expecting I'm going to be doing a lot more of this kind of thing, especially with COVID, the reality that we just can't be everywhere all the time. So these are images from that. Now, I keep talking about how this has to be ubiquitous, which means that it has to be low cost. So that I started working with VR 30 years ago, and you had to have an invite into very expensive laboratories at big institutions to even get access to it for short periods of time. It was just massively expensive. Well, now I've got VR headset, cost me $300. So this is ubiquitous. This is something that I work with more often. But that big giant robotic arm that I was carving with, that thing costs like $500,000. And you need a six-figure technician, engineer to run the damn thing. So how about low-cost robots? And how about what we really need is ones that really will do all the finishing work. You don't need one big robot. You need a lot of tiny little robots. And so I got connected with this company that's based in Las Vegas called Haddington Robots. And this is their Dexter. This is about a $10,000 machine now, which is, you know, there's a big difference between $500,000 and $10,000. This suddenly becomes doable. This thing can eventually be trained to cook an omelet for you, or wash your dishes, or clean your floors, or do a number, or make your sculptures. We're actually using motion capture. I taught animation, and we had motion capture systems. We're actually using motion capture so you can get the most highly skilled, hand-eye skilled experts in the world to capture the motion of the function that you need, and the robot will then recreate it exact. This is a surgically accurate robot for 10,000 bucks. The other thing is this will do home surgeries for you one day too. But of course, I'm always trying to figure out how it can be used for making art. So when I worked with Dr. Anthony Atala in 2012, that machine that you saw was $750,000, and it was the only one in the world like it. So I figured, well, if I'm going to actually further my synthetic biology ideas, I need to shrink the cost of that. So just a few years ago, while I was still teaching at New York Institute of Technology, I met up with a biologist from our medical school, and who had similar kinds of ideas, and he liked the things I was talking about. And we got to know the Haddington guys, and we go, oh, we could turn a Haddington robot into a 3D bioprinter for under $10,000. So we got a grant. I mean, it was a lousy, $10,000 for a grant is a small amount of money. But universities thinks that they're doing you some big favor if they're going to give you $10,000, even if we're going to radically change the future of science and bioengineering. But we built a functional, and this is no longer a 3D printer. This is a 4D printer. So it's actually meant to be injecting many different kinds of cell types in a matrix, and not just in that XYZ, but again, more like the 7-axis robot, that we can actually design the matrix and put different cells in different places. So organic material is much more complex than the model that we were working at with Dr. Anthony Atala. So this is not only a big step in terms of reducing the cost, it's exponentially, dimensionally, a far more sophisticated bioprinter. Now here we're only using 4 different cell types, but it isn't a big leap that we can have grids of these different cells. We could be potentially printing hundreds or even thousands of different cell types into the same system matrix. Okay, as if that's not enough, now we get into the sustainable life thing. Now, if you know who Buckminster Fuller is, this is not new ideas. In fact, we could trace some of these ideas back to primitive peoples who came up with great solutions thousands of years ago. The Buckminster Fuller developed the geodesic dome. So I'm kind of starting with that as a concept. Then I got introduced well, biology is not just 3D print. Biology does its own thing. Cells are intelligent agents, and they develop their own matrices, and they communicate. Well, if you watched Avatar, you should know that that's based on a real living type of Earth plant. And it's not, they don't even actually call mushrooms plants. They're like their own category. They don't know if they're plant, animal, there's something in between. But they have mycelium, which are these little hairs that grow into everything. They connect other trees and other plants in the forest. In fact, some of them are hundreds of miles square. So they are, in fact, the largest single creatures on the planet. Everybody thinks it's a whale. No, it's mushroom, mycelium. But you can grow mycelium in any form you want. It's a casting material, a living casting material. And architects have been figuring out, so this is an architectural process. They've wrapped material that grows the mycelium in it, and they're building a structure that will be a living structure. So these are just some of the pushing my earlier ideas and how we can turn these into sculptures. Again, this is not my work. This is what's called it's ramming earth into these bags, earth bags, and you stack them up. But I'm using that as a building concept, but to push the architecture further. And again, relating to some of the work they're doing with some of my earlier sculptures. So this is my design. This is a building, a sustainable building for the future, which will be 3D printed with a sculpture right out front on top of everything else. But you know, you also have to live. You got to eat, you got to go to the bathroom. I always decided that I want to design everything in a house. Kurt Schwitters created this concept called the Meersbau. And the Meersbau is you live inside of your art. Well, I want to design my spoons and forks, the cooking materials. I want to even, you know, you can 3D print food. I can eat my sculpture with my sculpture, and then I can take a dump in the sculpture and then bathe in my sculpture afterwards. I want no separation between life, sustainable life, and singularity art. I want it to all fuse. This is a concept, and out the window is the beginnings of my islands in the stream. This is a tiny island in the middle of the Philippines called Romblon. There are only 20,000 people on this island. It's got great scuba diving. This is January. So if you want to escape winter anywhere, Romblon is a very inexpensive place to go. And you'll be alone on the beach pretty much. But they also have 7 very high grade marbles on the island and very low cost stone carvers. So start comparing this technology with the high tech thing that I was showing you in Italy. It's this is how they all used to do it, but here they still do it this way. But what a beautiful place to work. You know, I always believe that you should work hard, but you should also play hard. And if you work hard, you deserve to play hard. And if you play hard, then you better start working hard. Now, of course, they make lots of tchotchke kind of art. You know, I'm not really enthused with all the whale stuff and everything, but you know, it also tells me what their craftsmanship is capable of doing, and that they can get those kinds of forms moving in space. They can pretty much work on anything I'm designing. And it's a family affair. Even the kids are out there. So here they're working with one of my 3D print parts to start figuring out how they're going to carve that piece in that block of stone. It's also a source of like lots of love. If you want marble sculpture, marble tables or things like that, vases, things that could cost hundreds, many thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, you can get it for dirt cheap on this little island. Just got to put it in a container and get it home. The shipping will cost you more than what you're going to pay for the stuff. So here's the local craftsman doing the first test piece. So you can see my 3D print and you can see the work he's producing from it. I mean, is this Islands in the Stream? This is it. And that's the little town of Romblon down there in the lower right-hand corner. You know, there's only a few thousand people who live in that town. Everybody else is spread around the island and it's just an archipelago. There's hundreds and thousands of islands out there surrounding this whole area. Now, this is the largest commission. I just got this in China a couple of years ago, and you should recognize the piece because I did a 2.5 foot version of it in Italy. But this was actually someone from China saw that piece in Italy and then convinced these business people to produce this piece at it's about 10 feet, I would 10 to 12 feet, somewhere there. Again, there's the model. Actually, there's two different scales of models that they're working from. You get more of a sense of scale from this. Now, 3D printing itself has gotten bigger. This is a 3D print. It's a 6 foot cubed 3D print on a beach in the south of China. Chinese curators came to my office in New York and saw my work. They chose this piece, which had been a pretty recent piece that I had 3D printed. I just sent them the digital file. I didn't even send them the model. I just sent them the file, and the Chinese did the rest. I showed up for a really nice exhibition opening. And this is actually some of the more important contemporary sculptors in China that I was fortunate to exhibit with. And I have a reputation in China as being the guy who brought digital sculpture to China, which is a huge thing now. Every art academy has got a digital sculpture area. I'm going to finish up with some new ideas that I'm working on, using metal finishes so that recreate gold, copper, silver, but with Cartesian grids that are using kind of LCD kind of lighting systems. Again, whenever I'm designing these things, I'm always seeing a grid. So why shouldn't my audience see a grid? And then these would be hanging sculptures. And COVID hit, obviously, everybody knows about that. And all of our lives changed, and all my ideas of sustainability became even more crucial. People are taking me more seriously now. I mean, you know, you can only talk sci-fi so long and people think you're a conspiracy theorist or somebody. But in my own life, I suddenly was told, well, you're going to have some more children. Okay, what children? You know, I got twin sons that were born 9 months ago. But while my wife was going through her pregnancy, I started visualizing sculptures of twins in utero. And of course, this is a visualization that's mocked up to look like a marble sculpture. And this one's meant to be a cast metal piece with gold, highly polished gold surface finish. It's a portal, a twin portal. I'm going to just quickly, oh, this is the most recent piece I did for the Intersculpt. Intersculpt is a group of sculptors from around the world that have been exhibiting digital art together for the last, well, since 1995. And this is the catalog page, but you'll see one sculpture that I haven't shown, and it's a 3D print with colored surface. Now, this is the visualization, but they actually did get a 3D print company to make a color. So color 3D prints are now one of those expanding technologies. I'm going to go quickly. This is my life now in the countryside growing stuff. So this is the real sculpture. And one of my sons, living around, you can create an immersive environment with your own little sculpture park. And that's it. Yeah, this is me as Star Traveler, Wild Child Star Traveler. You're welcome to check out my website. You'll see a lot of this art. You'll see a lot of those videos. You're also welcome to contact me. If you're somebody who's really interested in sustainable life and singularity technologies, learning this stuff, we are starting to establish the beginnings of a residency here on my place in California. And, if you don't mind living in a tent and eating off the land and working with it, we're also going to be generating our own electricity, solar, wind. We're doing it all. It's the whole package. But we're making art, and we're using that art to also create a sustainable life. And we want to share it with other places in the world. Like I want to do a prototype of my place here in California, and then create a village, say on Ramblan or places in Mexico. Or I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. These things can be done anywhere and everywhere. We don't have to design these mega future cities, which are going to cost billions of dollars and just be part of the whole corporate capitalist crap that we've been dealing with for hundreds of years. We actually have a chance for a change. We can all be in charge of our own lives, and this technology is cheap, and we don't need the corporations. We can do it without them. I'm open for questions and answers if everybody's like.
Oh, I got a lot of questions. I want to thank
good.
you.
Good.
How about, well, one, I want to thank you, Robert. This has been thoroughly amazing. My students, I introduced them a couple of weeks ago with 3D printing. They've been working in some small digital 3D model programs. And I think a couple of my students had said, it's so hard. Running these 3D programs is difficult. And my response was, you've only been at it for a couple of weeks. It takes a lot of time. And
yeah, I've been doing it for over 30 years now.
Yeah.
But honestly, I'll tell you a story. When I got started, I was working with this graduate student at Hunter College, and I had been waiting to get my hands on computers. I knew Bruce Beasley and Ken Snelson, but they had like $500,000 computers at the time. I couldn't compete with that. So I met this kid. It was like $3,000 machine in 1989. And so we worked together for about 6 months, and I was art directing ideas and he was building them in the computer. But then he got to work on this CD-ROM game that he had to create all these virtual characters and worlds and stuff. And he came back and goes, man, I wish you were working on a project with me. And I said, well, but I don't know, you're the guy that's the expert in the technology stuff. He goes, yeah, but you got all these other years of knowledge, and it really helps me when I'm working with you. So I said, well, we could just tell him I know what's going on. So I go and interview, they hire me on the spot and say, start Monday, it's Friday. I don't know how to fucking run a computer. I sat down with the tutorials for 3 days. I learned just enough so I could show up for work, turn the computer on, and actually start building a couple of rudimentary things that look like and I went home at the end of the day, did more too. I really needed to do that at work, and I had to bullshit that. And 9 months later, we won the Caddy Awards for Autodesk for characters and sets. It's if you're motivated, if you got a reason, and believe me, it's not wrong to lie. But if you lie, you got to deliver, right? And I learned that I learned that trick early in life, and then in teaching because I was teaching traditional sculpture, metal casting, foundry stuff, and suddenly everybody wants to hire me to teach 3D modeling and animation. This is back in the early 90s. And I'm like, well, God, these are really good schools. It was Institute, School of Visual Arts. I mean, Jesus, these kids know more than I do. And the trick I learned was I only have to be 2 weeks ahead of them. And for 40 years, I made sure I was 2 weeks ahead of the brightest students, or I got them. If I figured like you can't beat them, join them. It was like, hey, come be part of our collaborative team. I'll introduce you to people, blah. Listen, the trade-offs were well worthwhile. So anybody can do it, but learn to work with others. I mean, trying to do this crap by yourself, it's like trying to run a foundry by yourself. Forget it.
Well, it's no fun. I mean,
well, it's no fun, and it's difficult as hell. And,
yeah.
and you're always going to be limited. You're never going to be able to get off to the next big thing.
Yeah.
So if you want to be at the forefront of this stuff, you just have to decide to do it. You don't even have to know how to do it. Just have the idea, and then you figure out, well, so how am I going to do this? How am I going to be the first guy to do this thing? It isn't that tough when you start realizing that there's engineers, there's doctors, all kinds of technologists out there, and they want people with good ideas. They actually like working with artists. I've had a really good life doing collaborative projects with people who are not artists. And it makes them feel like they are artists, and they're working with ideas. They go, I could never have come up with that idea. I said, well, no, that's my job.
Well, I think I'll start off with another question that I'm looking forward to my students, because remember, I grade you on participation, and it's okay to talk to such a wonderful person, ask them questions. We don't get this often. But, a lot of times, Robert, I get pushback when I'm, talking about 3D prints, and you probably get this maybe a little bit.
You think?
But it's like,
listen. Years ago, everybody in the metal casting conferences literally thought I was Satan. When I'm joking about the peasants coming out with the pitchforks, I know this from personal experience. I know what it's like to be the monster.
Yeah.
And yet, within 10 years, everybody's like, "Oh, Robert, how did you know?" Because then like all the schools are throwing their money in. But the first 10 years, oh no, it was real crap. Because I had a lot of friends who were traditional art makers, and I didn't stop being a traditional art maker. I just added a whole new component.
Yeah.
Just another tool in the toolbox. It was pretty apparent to me. Now, fortunately, I had some good mentors. Bruce Beasley and Ken Snelson were. It's like you got guys like that on your team, and it's like, screw the rest of you people. You read about me in your next life,
So what about anyone else?
I get that it's still a problem, especially in very traditional art departments.
Well, I think what it is that people don't want to let go of this.
And they don't have to. I mean, for me, that's what I want.
I know.
I want to do that.
And 3D printing or this other anything that you're doing, it's still a lot of this. It's not like you push a button, it's all done for you, unless you send it to China, then it's kind of done for you. But they do a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah, and to work with people who are workers, you have to be a worker yourself. You can't really direct people, because many times I can tell you that even the best craftsmen, they're like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, or what you're saying is impossible. I said, come on, it's not impossible. Take the tools in my hands. I sit there and I start doing it, and they're like, oh, okay, we can't bullshit him. and then suddenly they're doing everything just the way you want it done. It's like, then they have respect for you too, because it's like, oh, he's just not one of those.
Yeah.
He's a maker.
Yeah. How about some of my students? Any questions? Hey, we got the crew from Wales. Good to see you back.
Hello, Wales.
I know they came to the morning session. They're back for your session. So good to see them.
Cheers, mates.
I've got a question, if that's all right.
Sure.
So when you were talking about the 3D printed human flesh piece with the exoskeleton going around it, it made me think of with NFT technologies now and implantable microchips, it could be like entirely reversed, and a human is the exoskeleton for the digital piece. I just wondered what you thought of something like that.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, when I first got involved, I wanted to avoid the whole brain thing, because there's sentience and there's pain, and I didn't want my sculptures to feel pain and the rest of it. But that was about 8 years ago, and I've kind of moved past that and realized that as we become part of the machine, we become part of larger entities. And if I'm making a synthetic bio robot, it actually can be an extension of me. So as I'm moving in my head in virtual reality, I can be controlling it, and it can be in an environment that I could never go to. So I won't need, I love scuba diving, but you get older, you just can't do that crap anymore. But I can make a bio robot that could go to depths that even when I was at my height of scuba diving, I could never go below, say, 150 feet. I can design a bio robot that could go down to depths of thousands of feet. That also means that you can do it on our planet. You could do it on the moons of around Saturn, Europa or Io or something. So we can actually, in the future, live briefly through these artificial intelligence systems that we're creating, that will have some controllable AI, but we will be able to be sort of in a first-person view and operate from that. While I'm doing my Steve Hawking's thing back in Earth someplace, when I'm 200 years old and I can't move anymore, like Futurama, and they take my brain out and they put it in a jar someplace. We actually can keep the brain alive, separate from the body, and we can keep it moving through virtual worlds. And it will be a fusion of artificial intelligence and virtual reality, and it will be complete ubiquitous. Like you will move freely through those. I've had some minor experiences that give me a sense of what that's going to be like. It isn't that bad. I hope that answers your question, or is there a part that I didn't cover for you?
No, that's awesome, Matt. Thank you so much.
Sure. Cheers. I spent a lot of time in England. I love England. So, and Wales is a very nice part of the UK.
You mean the best part?
That's not what they told me in Scotland. I spent a lot of time in the north with Geordies and in the Midlands, and they all say the same thing. That's part of the UK, but yet Wales is particularly beautiful, like the Lake District. Oh, that's like nice stuff. And I always liked The Prisoner, and that was all shot in Wales, right?
Well, the one thing I find is incredibly interesting is how technology is really changing so rapidly. My son went to the beach this summer, and somebody there had a VR set up, and he loved it. And then he came back, he said, "Dad, I need to get one." I said, "Well, we got to think about the computer you need." He goes, "I didn't have a computer."
No.
And it's like, what the hell happened in a year? It's like, okay, I don't need to get a computer. Cool, we'll get one for Christmas.
No excuse, Dad. $300.
Yeah, I know.
That's
I
it.
know. And we have like 4 of them at Lamar University. They've been barely taken out of the box. This happens a lot at universities where they don't get touched for a while, and then they become out of date.
Yeah,
Because I remember we had to buy some real powerful laptops to run them.
Sure. Well, just a heads up though, the $300 headset systems are fine if you're a consumer, but if you want to be the content generator, you still have to have the computer.
Yeah, but even the old ones, because the ones we bought, I think were $400, so they weren't that terribly expensive.
Yeah, well, I would say that if you want to do VR, you need a computer that costs at least $1,000. Personally, I'd rather spend like $1,500 to $2,000. I recently bought a desktop for over $3,000 because it's a screamer, and it's a computer design like I've never seen before. So, once in a while I'll drop, some big dollars, but most of the time I prefer to do the art over thing and look for the cheap, simple solutions.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I have a laptop that I bought just here recently. It was a couple $1,000 that you kind of go, but it's a screamer. And
it's just like, it's like, am I going to fly a biplane or am I going to fly a jet?
Yeah, I know.
Give me a jet, please.
I get used to my laptop. Now I got to go spend a couple $1,000 on my desktop because this is so slow.
Yeah.
But it is very, very interesting. Even with laser cutting, used to, and not too long ago, you had to have this behemoth, and then all of a sudden you can get them. They're advertised on TV. You can, buy one for whatever, how many hundreds of dollars.
Listen, you can get a $400 computer, download Tinkercad, which is literally made for children, but it's a very sophisticated 3D CAD program, and anything that to design, and there's lots of tutorials and stuff. Kids gravitate to this stuff quick. You can 3D print that stuff. You can drop it into VR. I mean, you can do everything, and as long as they can actually move it, run the keyboard and move a mouse, those are the minimum skills they need. About 7 or 8 years old, I think. There's a few prodigies out there that probably do it a little younger, but
yeah, that's what they're all using now is Tinkercad. But then we have advanced programs. But I always tell them, if I bring you into these other programs that'll do a lot more things, you will be very sad and you will quit. So we got to get you excited before you So you don't get sad, you get a better understanding of the interface.
Yeah, but think about what it was like when there weren't all these options and there was only the engineering grade,
Yeah.
which was really counterintuitive for a creative person. You know, thank God there was programs like Autodesk 3D Studio. I would have been dead in the water if it wasn't for a program like that. But when I wanted to start manufacturing things, I had to learn egregious, difficult engineering programs, and I'm glad I don't need to use them anymore.
Yeah, there's some, I think it's Fusion 360. And I've watched a lot of tutorials, and I've gone to different conferences, and I've watched people talk about it, and my head hurts every time for various reasons. But I think it might be because I know some other software, and I kind of am stuck on it. But who knows? It is what it is, and in the end, isn't it just about? It's about getting what you want to get done.
Hey, it's like the difference between I only have $200, so I'm going to buy an arc welder. I would really like to have a TIG welder, but I don't got $2,000. You know, it's the same kind of decisions.
Yeah, it is. You're right. Yeah. Well, I don't know if any of my students are bold enough to ask you a question, but if you want to, now's the time.
You can even make personal evaluations like, are you out of your effing mind? You know, that's
I mean,
yeah, I generally don't bite.
looking at it, I wonder, like, how far do you feel like you would want this to go?
Hey man, as far as we go in our lifetime, I want to be one of the people out front. I don't know what else to put it, you know. How far did Michelangelo want to go? Or Bernini, right? Donatello. These guys pushed some serious parameters, and we're all living in the world, thank God, that has those advantages. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel. So I'm just doing my part. I just feel like I'm part of a larger, you know, what it's humanity is a organism that's been around for 3 million years, and we're still existing because all of our ancestors tried their hardest to figure out ways to survive. And once they got past that, then they started going, well, what about this art and philosophy thing? You know, we're part of a bigger thing, and it's good to start thinking about yourself in that way. And as an artist, realizing that artists have always been at the forefront. You know, we've always known the top movers and shakers. We were friends with the inventors, and often were the inventors. We even ran countries, who turned the world over to the artists. But right now, personally, I think that artists are the ones who are going to save us. When I'm talking about singularity art and sustainability, I'm talking about saving the world. And when I talk about, you know, can we sustain ourselves on Mars? What I'm really saying is, when we turn our atmosphere into a Martian atmosphere, do we really have to eat shit potatoes? You know, if you've seen the Matt Damon movie, you'd know that reference. But no, the answer is no, we shouldn't have to. Actually, you know, as intelligent as that film was in some ways, I figured out much easier ways to grow potatoes. I could have produced 5 times more potatoes than that asshole did. So, you know,
I really like the approach, because like in one of my earlier classes, because I have a class with like a Mr. Gashow, and he was also talking about how like he felt people are more reactive than proactive to the like environmental like problems of the planet. And I really like that idea, like to become more like proactive about it.
yeah. But again, who are the people who are more likely to be proactive in the first place? artists tend to be like, you don't do very well as an artist if you're not proactive. And so if you can turn your own art survival skills into survival skills that can help the planet, then you've developed a social consciousness, which again, artists have been the social conscious for the world for a very long time. You're just simply doing what you say you want to do. I mean, art students are all trying to, I want to go back to the whole graphic design thing. Why was I a graphic designer as an undergraduate? Because I was afraid to be an artist. And when did I stop being afraid? About the time I graduated with an undergraduate degree in graphic design and realized it was the last effing thing I wanted to do in my life. Now, did I do it to survive and pay bills? Yeah, I've done lots of graphic design work, and all those skills I learned have been very useful, especially moving into technology. But I didn't go into this wanting to be a graphic designer. I wanted to be an artist, and I had to face that fact that okay, so where's the next dollar going to come from? That's why I became a graphic designer. I didn't know how I was going to earn a living. And then I just figured it out. You just do it, and you lie, and you promise shit that you think you can't deliver, and you work your ass off to deliver it. That's how artists have always done it. And that is what being proactive is. It means you're a risk taker. And the world is not armed with a lot of risk takers, because generally risk taking is risky business. But in a world where everybody is entering a high risk zone, I'd rather be working with risk takers to try to figure out how we keep this thing afloat, this thing we call humanity.
Great question, Kobe. Thank you.
Yeah, good. And it means you're thinking, man. It means that you want to do it. So my only advice is do it. Just do it. Don't even worry about it anymore. Get past the worry. You'll figure it out. It'll be like you feel like you're flying from the seat of your pants, but it's like, isn't that what barnstormers did in the first planes? Literally flew by the seat of their pants. It's how anybody who's innovative does anything, and will always be those same people. So you can just be one by deciding to be one. It almost is as simple as that, except the responsibility, then you actually have to live up to your own street cred.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Listen, I retired from teaching, but I can tell you that I actually love teaching. I didn't retire from teaching because I was tired of teaching. I was tired of dealing with other academics. And it's not like I didn't have good colleagues. I had some really good colleagues, but some of my best colleagues were in other parts of the world, at other universities. We formed our own teams. We could have made amazing universities if we'd all been hired, but then you find out that academia is full of people who aren't real risk takers, who aren't really very creative, who aren't really artists. Even some of them call themselves artists. Not really, not in the truest sense. And those are the people that I got tired of working with. But I'm very happy to teach people. And in fact, the old model used to be that you say, come live at my house. This is how philosophers were taught. You went and lived in Plato's house. And most of the time you had to go, clean the stairs and, clean up the dishes and make sure everybody's fed. And then once in a while he's getting a brain fart. He's like, okay, gather around, and he's dropping pearls on you, wisdom pearls. Art was the same thing. How did Michelangelo eventually got some art training because he attracted the attention of the Medici, and they gave him a rich man's education. But before that, He did what most artists were doing, and he worked in another artist's studio, and he learned the trade by working on other people's work. But once you learn stuff and then you figure out how to put it in your own terms, to me, this is why I'm saying I'm reaching out. If there's young people who want to really try, if you think 3D programs are difficult, I promise you, you come work with me, and in a month, not only will you know how to run some very sophisticated 3D programs and play in VR and stuff like that, you'll also know how to grow vegetables. You'll also probably know how to drive a tractor, dig a hole, and it's all part of the same thing. It's the best kind of education. And I think that is one of those things as we go into the future, and we're going to have to reimagine education. And education needs to be about the real things, not just the theory. The theory is wonderful. I love conceptual work. I make conceptual work, but I get turned off by people whose work is so conceptual that it's lame. Like, if the concept is the most important thing, then how could you show up with a dumb idea? Like, excuse me, if your art is only concept, then man, it better be a damn good concept. Or else you better learn to be an artist and do all the tricks. It's like learning magic. How do you communicate with human beings? The other advice I'll give to everybody, if you're a young art student, if you haven't read Carl Jung's Man and His Symbols, it's time that you did. It's like you learn how to hack the human psyche. There's nothing better that any artist or any storyteller can do than to learn how to hack the human psyche. And it is a code. It's a code of symbols. It takes a long time, but you read that book and you'll already be on the path to being a better artist and a better communicator.
Well, Robert, my class is about ready to end. And as much as I'd like to stay and talk with you for hours and hours and come live at your house, you can show me how to grow tomatoes so I can do it better, and then I'll grow them.
Hey,
because that's what it's all about. And
yeah, we can always share that kind of information online. And actually, thank God, I don't have to reinvent that wheel. YouTube has got everything.
Yeah, I know. As my wife said, y'all got it good. Anything you want to figure out is on YouTube. So
yes. And that is part of the promise of the singularity. It is part of our mind hive now.
It is. It is. Well, Robert, I want to thank you. And I ask everybody to turn off your microphone, unmute yourself so we can give Robert a nice round of applause. This doesn't happen virtually very often because, this is like me lecturing. Are you all there? Can you hear me? So here we go. And we can do it like Wayne Potratz, but we'll do it differently. This isn't an iron pour. So on three, everybody's got nobody wants to turn off their mic. Got a few.
My hands ready.
I got it. Okay, well, on three, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Good luck to all of you. Make good art wherever you are.
I'll see everybody in my class on Thursday, face-to-face. Can't wait. Thank you again, Robert. We'll be in touch. And I'll keep you up to date with this recording. I got to get it to my colleague and we'll get it going. It might take about a week because everything is always slower than you want.
Sure, of course. I get it.
Got it. Thank you again, Robert. It really was wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.